Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, I have a special story for you. It's a story about hope, about chasing a dream, and about never giving up, no matter how hard life gets. It's a story that I hope will inspire you and remind you that your journey, with all its ups and downs, is what makes you strong. So, get comfortable, and let's begin. In a small, forgotten town where the houses were painted in faded colors and the streets were always quiet, lived a young boy named Leo. Leo's world was small, but his dreams were as big as the sky. He lived with his grandmother in a tiny house, with a creaky wooden door and windows that rattled when the wind blew. His family didn't have much money. Most days, dinner was a simple soup, and new clothes were a luxury they couldn't afford. Leo's school was old and crowded. The books were torn, and the teachers were tired. Many of his classmates had already accepted their fate. They would grow up and work in the local factory, just like their parents. But Leo had a secret dream. Tucked away under his thin mattress was a worn-out book about the stars, views, filled with pictures of distant galaxies, colorful nebulas, and planets he could only imagine. Every night, while his grandmother slept, Leo would stare out of his window, looking at the stars, and dream of becoming an astronomer. He wanted to discover new worlds and understand the secrets of the universe. This dream was his escape. It was a light in his otherwise gray world. But sharing it felt impossible. Who would understand? To the people in his town, dreaming so big was foolish. Keep your feet on the ground, Leo, they would say. The stars are for looking at, not for reaching. Their words were like heavy stones. But Leo's dream was a stubborn little flower, pushing its way through the cracks. As he grew older, the challenges grew bigger. To help his grandmother, Leo started working after school. He would clean shops, deliver newspapers, and do any small job he could find. His hands were often rough and dirty, and his body was tired. There were nights he was too exhausted to even open his astronomy book. He would just fall into bed, and the stars in his mind seemed to dim. The fear of failure began to whisper in his ear. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe his dream was just a childish fantasy. One cold evening, after a long day of work, Leo was walking home, feeling completely defeated. He hadn't eaten much, and the little money he earned was barely enough to buy medicine for his grandmother. He sat on a bench in the empty town square, ready to give up. The stars were hidden behind thick clouds, just like his hope. He felt a tear roll down his cheek. "It's too hard," he whispered to the empty night. Just then, an old man sat down beside him. It was Mr. Aris, the town's retired librarian. He was a kind man with eyes that held a universe of stories. He had seen Leo in the library many times, always lost in books about science and space. "A heavy heart for such a young man," Mr. Aris said softly. Leo, surprised, wiped his tear away. He didn't know what to say, but Mr. Aris just smiled. "I know about your dream, Leo. The one about the stars." Leo's eyes widened. He had never told anyone how. He asked, "Mr. Aris," pointed to Leo's worn-out bag, where the corner of his favorite astronomy book was sticking out. "Dreams have a way of showing themselves," he said. That night, Mr. Aris didn't offer advice or easy solutions. He just listened. He listened to Leo's fears, his struggles, and the dream that refused to die. For the first time, Leo felt understood. He wasn't alone. That conversation was a small spark, but it was enough. Leo went back to his books with renewed energy. He realized his dream wasn't just about escaping his small town. It was about building a new life. He started studying harder than ever. He used the library as his second home, reading every science book he could find. Mr. Aris became his mentor, guiding him, explaining difficult concepts, and encouraging him to ask questions. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. To become an astronomer, he needed to go to a university, and that required a lot of money. The thought was terrifying. It was a mountain so high he couldn't see the top. Still, he started saving every single coin he earned. He gave up the small joys, like a rare sweet or a new pencil. The coin was a step, no matter how small, toward his goal. One day, Mr. Aris told him about a national science competition for students. The grand prize was a full scholarship to the country's best university. It was a long shot, a 1 in a million chance. The other participants would be from big cities, with access to modern labs and expensive equipment. What did Leo have? An old library and a mind full of dreams. Doubt crept in again. He felt like a tiny boat in a vast, stormy ocean. He spent days thinking he wasn't good enough. He saw the comfortable, predictable path of working at the factory and felt a strange pull toward its safety. But then he remembered his promise to himself, the promise he made every night while looking at the stars. He remembered Mr. Arisa's belief in him. With courage he didn't know he had, Leo decided to enter the competition. His project was ambitious, to build a simple, homemade telescope and use it to map a small, undocumented section of the night sky. No fancy materials. He used old pipes, lenses he bought from a second-hand shop, and a stand he built from scrap wood. For months, he worked tirelessly. His small room turned into a chaotic workshop. He spent countless nights on his roof, shivering in the cold, carefully observing and drawing the stars. There were many failures. Lenses cracked. Measurements were wrong. Some nights the sky was too cloudy. He felt frustrated and wanted to quit more times than he could count. But each failure taught him something new. He learned patience. He learned precision. You learned that progress wasn't a straight line, but a messy, winding path. The day of the competition arrived. Leo traveled to the capital city, a place so big and loud it made him feel even smaller. He stood in a huge hall next to students, with polished projects and confident smiles. His homemade telescope looked clumsy and amateurish next to their high-tech models. He overheard people whispering and laughing at his simple creation. His heart sank. He wanted to hide, to run back to the safety of his quiet town. He took a deep breath and looked down at his rough, calloused hands. These hands had worked hard. They had built something from nothing. He thought of his grandmother's hopeful smile and Mr. Arisa's encouraging words. He wasn't just representing himself. He was representing every dreamer from a small town, every person who was ever told they couldn't. When it was his turn to present, he was terrified. His voice shook as he began to speak. But as he started talking about the stars, his passion took over. He didn't just talk about his project. He told his story, spoke of the beauty of the night sky over his small town, of the challenges he faced, and of how his dream kept him going. He showed them his detailed, hand-drawn star maps. His presentation wasn't polished, but it was real. It was filled with heart. The judges listened intently. They asked him difficult questions, not to test him, but because they were genuinely curious. They saw past the simple materials of his telescope and saw the brilliance of his mind and the fire in his spirit. After the presentations, as he waited for the results, Leo felt a strange sense of peace. He had done his best. He had faced his biggest fear. No matter what happened, he was proud of himself. When they finally announced the winner, he was so lost in his thoughts that he barely heard his own name. Leo, a voice called out. He looked up, confused. The entire hall was looking at him, and they were clapping. He had won. Leo stood frozen, the scholarship certificate in his trembling hands. It didn't feel real. He, the boy from the small, forgotten town, was going to university. He had not only reached for the stars, but he had also caught one. The joy was overwhelming, a bright, shining light that filled every corner of his being. As he walked out of the hall and into the city night, he looked up. The sky was clear, and the stars seemed to be shining just for him. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for every struggle, every setback, and every person who had helped him along the way. He knew this wasn't the end of his journey. It was the beginning. The university was a new, bigger world, with even greater challenges, was another mountain to climb. But for the first time in his life, Leo wasn't afraid of how high it was. He was excited to start the climb. The last time we saw Jack, he was standing at the edge of the Whispering Woods, the ancient map clutched in his hand, pointing deeper into the shadows. He took a deep breath, the scent of pine and damp earth filling his lungs, and stepped into the unknown. The sunlight vanished almost instantly, replaced by a dim green glow filtering through the thick canopy of leaves above. The air grew cooler, and a hush fell over everything, broken only by the crunch of his boots on fallen leaves. For the first few hours, the journey was just a walk. The path was clear enough, and the woods, while eerie, seemed peaceful. Jack started to relax, thinking maybe the legends were just old stories. He followed the map, his eyes tracing the faded ink lines that led toward a landmark called the Weeping Willow. He remembered his grandfather's words. "The willow doesn't weep for sadness, Jack, it weeps for those who are lost." As the day wore on, the woods began to change. The trees grew closer together, their branches twisting into strange claw-like shapes. The path started to fade, sometimes disappearing completely under thick roots and thorny bushes. Jack had to use his small knife to cut his way through. Doubt began to creep into his mind. Was he going the right way? The map seemed to say so, but the forest felt like it was trying to push him back. Suddenly, he heard a sound, a soft musical humming. It was beautiful and strange, echoing through the trees. Jack froze, listening. It seemed to be coming from just ahead. Cautiously, he moved forward, pushing aside a curtain of hanging moss, and then he saw her. Sitting on a large moss-covered rock was a girl. She had long silver hair that seemed to shimmer in the dim light, and she was weaving a basket from glowing reeds. She looked up as he approached, her eyes the color of a clear winter sky. She wasn't startled, she simply smiled. "You're a long way from home, traveler," she said, her voice the same melody he had heard. Jack was speechless for a moment. He hadn't expected to meet anyone here. I'm looking for the sunstone," he managed to say, holding up the map. The girl's smile faded slightly. "Many have looked, the forest doesn't give its secrets." Easily, she introduced herself as Alara, a guardian of the woods. She explained that the forest was a living entity, with its own rules and its own magic. The humming he heard was the forest's energy, something only those who respected it could perceive. Alara offered to guide him, but on one condition: he had to prove he was worthy. The first test was simple. He had to cross the glimmering stream, a body of water that appeared shallow but had a current strong enough to pull a person under in seconds. The trick wasn't strength, but balance and focus. Jack watched as Alara gracefully stepped onto a series of smooth, slippery stones, moving like a dancer. When it was his turn, his heart pounded. He took his first step, and his foot immediately slipped. He flailed, almost falling, but remembered Ilara's calm focus. He took a deep breath, centered himself, and tried again. He moved slowly, deliberately, feeling each stone with his foot before putting his weight on it. It was terrifying. The water rushed around his ankles, cold and powerful, but he made it. Shaking, but he made it to the other side. Alara nodded in approval. "You have a strong will, but the forest will test more than just your will." Over the next few days, Alara led him deeper into the woods, and each day brought a new challenge. One day, they had to navigate the maze of whispers, a section of the forest where voices would echo, trying to confuse and misdirect them. The voices whispered his deepest fears, that he would fail, that he wasn't good enough, that he would never be like his grandfather. It took all of Jack's mental strength to block them out and trust Elira's guidance. He learned to listen to the true sounds of the forest instead of the tricks of the maze. Another challenge tested his compassion. They found a young fox with its leg caught in a cruel metal trap, clearly not set by any guardian of the forest. The fox was scared and aggressive, snapping at them. Instead of leaving it, Jack spent nearly an hour slowly calming the animal, speaking to it in a soft voice, before he could get close enough to carefully release its leg from the trap's jaws. He used herbs Alara gave him to treat the wound. As they left, the fox watched them go, a look of understanding in its eyes. Jack was changing. He was no longer just the boy from the village with a dream. The forest was teaching him patience, resilience, and a deeper connection to the world around him. He felt stronger, not just in his body, but in his spirit. He and Alara became close friends. He told her about his village, his dreams, and the grandfather he missed so much. She told him about the magic of the woods, the ancient spirits that slept there, and the growing shadow that threatened it, a shadow cast by people who wanted to exploit the forest, not protect it. One evening, As they sat by a campfire, Elara grew serious. The sunstone is not just a treasure, Jack, it is the heart of the forest. It provides light and life to this place. But its power is fading. She explained that a sorcerer named Malika was trying to find it. He wanted to drain its energy for his own dark purposes, which would plunge the woods, and eventually the world, into darkness. The traps they had found were his. He was getting closer, suddenly. Jack's quest felt much bigger. It wasn't just about fulfilling his grandfather's legacy anymore. It was about protecting this magical place and the new friend he had made. His dream had evolved into a mission. Finally, they reached the Weeping Willow. It was a magnificent tree, larger than any Jack had ever seen. Its long, drooping branches shimmering with a soft silver light. Water dripped from the tips of its leaves, creating a gentle, rain-like sound. It wasn't weeping in sadness. It was a curtain of living water. The entrance is behind the waterfall of leaves, Elara whispered. But be warned, the final guardian is inside. Not a creature of the forest, but a reflection of yourself. You must face the hardest parts of your own heart to pass. Taking a deep breath, Jack pushed through the shimmering watery leaves and stepped into the darkness beyond. He found himself in a large, circular cave. In the center, on a stone pedestal, was an object glowing with a warm, golden light. The sunstone, it was more beautiful than he could have ever imagined. But, as he took a step toward it, a figure emerged from the shadows. It looked exactly like him, but this version of Jack was different. His eyes were cold, and his smile was cruel. So, you finally made it, the double said, its voice a twisted echo of his own. Why are you here? For glory. To prove you're better than everyone back home. You don't care about this forest. You just want the prize. Jack was stunned. The double was voicing all the selfish thoughts and doubts he'd had at the beginning of his journey. That's not true, Jack said, his voice shaking slightly. Zinnig, the double sneered. You left your home, your responsibilities, all for a childish fantasy. You think this stone will solve all your problems. It will only make you greedy for more. They fought, not with fists, but with words and will. The double brought up every mistake Jack had ever made, every fear he held, every moment of weakness. With each accusation, the cave seemed to grow darker, and the sunstone's light dimmed. Jack felt his resolve crumbling. Maybe the double was right, but then, he thought of his grandfather's trust. He thought of Elara's friendship. He thought of the fox he had saved. He remembered the feeling of accomplishment after crossing the stream, the focus it took to ignore the whispers. He was not the same person who had entered these woods. You're wrong, Jack said, his voice now firm and clear. Maybe I started this journey for myself, but it's not about me anymore. It's about protecting this place. It's about honoring the people who believe in me. You are my fear, you are my doubt, and I am leaving you behind. As he spoke, a brilliant light erupted from his chest. The dark double recoiled, shielding its eyes, and then dissolved into shadows. The cave was filled with the warm, golden light of the sunstone again, brighter than before. Jack walked to the pedestal and reached out his hand. The moment his fingers touched the sunstone, a wave of energy surged through him. It was warm, powerful, and full of life. He saw visions, the history of the forest, the creation of the stone, and the looming threat of Malika. He understood. The stone needed to be recharged at the peak of dawn, the highest mountain in the realm, before the next solar eclipse. And the eclipse was only 3 days away. Carefully wrapped the sunstone in a protective cloth Elara had given him and placed it in his bag. He hurried out of the cave, back through the waterfall of leaves. Elara was waiting, but her face was pale with fear. Jack, hurry, he's here. Before Jack could ask who, a chilling voice echoed through the clearing. Thank you, boy, for doing all the hard work for me. From the trees stepped a tall man cloaked in black robes, his face pale, and his eyes glowing with a faint red light. Malika, in his hand, he held a dark twisted staff, and behind him, held captive by enchanted vines, was Malika smiled, a cold, predatory expression. Give me the stone, and I might let your friend live. Jack stood frozen. The weight of the sunstone in his bag, the fate of the forest on his shoulders, and his friend's life hanging in the balance. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to like and subscribe for part 3 to find out what happens next. And that's a wrap on today's video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the very end. I really hope you found it helpful and maybe even a little bit entertaining. If you did, it would mean the world to me if you could hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you enjoy this kind of content. And hey, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on what's coming next. We have some amazing videos planned that you won't want to miss. I love hearing from you all, so drop a comment down below and let me know what you thought or what you'd like to see in a future video. I read every single one. Thanks again for watching. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!